Hi there, and welcome to the Simply Living for Him podcast. I'm Karen DeBuse from Simply Living for Him. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Simply Living for Him podcast. On this podcast, I talk about all things simple, whether it's life out here on our hobby farm, how I keep things simple in my homeschool, or you'll always just hear a lot about Jesus. Because I truly do believe the remedy for clutter and chaos in our world is Jesus. The more we desire Him, the less we naturally desire the things of this world, and the easier it is to live more simply. So thank you for joining me again. We're doing something with this podcast. Once again, it will be video recorded. So if you are the type that likes YouTube and you like to see the person behind the voice, you can go check this out on my YouTube channel as well. I will link that in the podcast episode. We're just trying this for a couple of weeks. I don't know how it will go, but we're trying to have some different ways to hear the podcast or see the podcast or however it is you learn best. Quick, before I start today's episode, I wanted to let you know, because I will totally forget, the Bible-based homeschooling e-course, which is my e-course that I wrote to share how we use the Bible as our main textbook in our homeschool for an entire year. That is on sale right now to celebrate the Back to School 2019 school year. The e-course is available for just $19. Normally it's $34.95. So that is a big discount if you've been thinking about the course, if you would thought maybe this year you might want to plan for a little break during your year, just to try something new. Go check out the Bible-based homeschooling e-course at simplylivingforhim.thinkific.com. It's only available for the sale price up until August 8th, so go check that out and take advantage of that sale. I also want to thank our podcast sponsor, Apologia. Right now, if you're in back-to-school mode, go check out Apologia at apologia.com. They have amazing homeschool curriculum. We have been using Apologia for our entire homeschooling career, and it's truly one of our favorites, so go check them out. Today, I'm going to share with you guys about trying to change our perspective a little bit on just how big our God is. And when we have that perspective, it is going to be much easier to live more simply. It's going to be much easier to kind of weed out the noise and the distractions when we truly look at how big God is. So I'm excited about this episode because I'm going to tell you guys that this week, I started reading a book. This is where the inspiration for this podcast came from. And so this week, or I guess it was last week, I started reading a book about the moon and about the men that landed on the moon. So what does that have to do with this podcast episode? You're going to hear. Okay, so let me go back to the beginning. I guess it was back on July 20th, I remember the date, that it was the anniversary of the 50 years of the moon landing. And I don't know, it was one of those days I was just sort of scanning the internet and started reading all these articles and got really interested in the whole moon landing. And then I started to read about these controversies that it didn't exist. Have you read about those or watched those documentaries? So then I got all wrapped up in that, and I started reading all those, controversies that we didn't really land on the moon and it was all fake. Then I started reading all the counter, arguments to that, and I kind of really just got sucked in, and then I realized what hogwash those controversies are, that it really did happen. So anyway, that following week I was at the library with my kids, and I picked out this book. I should have brought it with me since I have a video I can show you guys, but it's this thick. I'm showing you if you're watching the video. It's 700 pages or 600 and something pages. It's huge. And so I came home with my moon book, and I'm like, and the kids, they're cracking up because all of a sudden I'm like telling them all the things I'm learning about the moon. It was just fascinating. The whole thing behind how we got people to the moon and all that was so fascinating to me. I don't know, I just got into it. So anyway, every night I would read my book, and then I would tell the family all my little facts. I'd be like, did you know this? And did you know that? And they were sort of like, okay, Mom, you're like in your moon thing right now. They're just humoring me and letting me tell them all my facts. Well, the thing that I wanted to talk about on this podcast that has really struck me the most from this book is really looking at the perspective so differently of our life and our world and how teeny tiny we are and how great and big God is. So, you know how I always talk about on this podcast, how can we live more simply? How can we keep our eyes on Jesus? How do we eliminate distractions? Well, I feel like when I was reading this moon book, I learned a new way to really, truly eliminate distractions and to live more simply and to focus on God and what matters most. And that was by focusing on how big He really is. And then when I say that, I know there's people out there who are like, yeah, we know God is so big. Like, I've done that, right? I think about, well, God is so big, but then we still go and make him small. Like the very next day, like we'll talk about how big he is and how we can't really fathom God's power and his majesty. And then the next day we just like go back to making him really small and making him almost like us. And the couple of things that I really gained perspective in my little moon, studies was these astronauts, when they were off of Earth and they were looking at Earth from the moon. Okay, so everything, all of humanity, everything they know in existence, all of life is in this tiny little one, circle that they can put their thumb over if they close their eyes because they're that far away. But everything in existence they can see at one time in this tiny little ball of Earth. And a lot of them talked about the spiritual things that they learned being out there. One of them said, like, seeing Earth from the moon solidified his belief in a creator. There is no way, he said, you could be out there and not see a creator. And some of them talked about wrestling when they were out there with just how small they are. We get so wrapped up in our little universe, like our universe that exists in our little world, that we don't even think about how big the universe is that God created. And so this book, little did I know, I was just interested in the moon landing. It really started to get me thinking about, it's easy to talk about how big God is, and we talk about how powerful and majestic he is, but I don't know that we really grasp it. And I don't think I know we can't actually grasp it. Because even if we try to grasp it by a smidgen, it's too much for our minds to wrap around. But if we really think about it, this is what happened to me the one night. So I'm reading the book, and it's just amazing how these men are talking about, the vastness of the universe, how huge it is, and how it changed them to be able to see the earth all at once, But one of the things that I realized the one night, and I said to Steve, I'm like, if you guys have heard me talk before about this kind of stuff, I think way too much. I overthink things all the time. I don't know if it's overthinking. I like to think about things, right? And I'm always thinking about, I tell my kids, this is the joke around here, every little grain of sand, right? Like God, he didn't just create the whole universe. He knows every cell down to the smallest molecule that exists, of people, of the sand, of the grass, of the ocean. That to me is huge already, right? He doesn't just know me. He knows every cell that makes up my body, down to the smallest atom. Times that by every person in existence now, that ever existed before, and that ever will exist in the future. He knows everything down to the tiniest atom. Not just of people, but of all the grass, all the dirt, all the sand, all the clouds, all the trees, I mean, all the animals. I could go on and on. Like, okay, right there, mind blown. There's so much there that I can't wrap my head around. But then as I'm reading this moon book, I'm realizing, okay, so I always think about that, how big God is in comparison to us and the earth. But now I'm like throwing in the moon, which is still just a tiny part of the entire universe. And I said to Steve the one night, this is what boggles my mind. So the men are talking about the moon and the landscape of the moon and what it looks like while they're on the moon and the craters and the mountains, and it's huge, right? Not as huge as Earth, but it's this huge thing. And I'm thinking, okay, now God knows every single cell that makes up that moon. But then I'm thinking, I don't understand. Like, there's this whole universe out there. There's this entire moon. It's in existence right now. There's this moon out there right now with mountains on it and craters. But no one ever saw it up close until 1969. No one has seen it again since 1970 something. And it's still in existence, as is the other planets and stuff and stars and suns that fill the universe. And no one ever sees it. So I said to Steve, so why did God create it? Now, isn't that making me the center of my own universe? Why did God create this whole universe? If I couldn't see it, right? Isn't that how we as people think sometimes, or as humans? That's what I mean by making it our own universe. Like, I literally was like, well, I wonder why God created all that stuff if people haven't really ever seen it, and there's a lot of stuff that people will never see. And then I was like, brought back to reality and thought, Karen, we are not all there is. We are not the center of our own world. God is God, and I think He created all this huge, vastly enormous universe that we can't wrap our brains around to show how big He really is. And the funny thing was, the next day, we do a devotional every single night. I think I've shared it with you guys on here. I know I've shared it in various places, but it's called Indescribable by Louis Giglio. And my son, it's his book. It's a kid's devotional. And so he reads to us every single night his devotion. The next day, I'm not even joking, the next day, the devotional was about that very thing, about God creating the universe to show us just how big He is. And I looked at Steve and I'm like, oh my goodness, did I not just say that yesterday? Like, that was crazy. But anyway, I think we need to sometimes look outside of ourselves at how big this world is, at how big the universe is, to find our proper place. We think we're so important. We think the world revolves around us. We think, our own little worlds revolve around us. But there is this enormous universe out there that points to a creator and that helps us to put in perspective this amazing, awesome, incredible, indescribable, uncontainable, right? I'm going to start singing the song, God, creator that there is. And I think in terms of simplifying, it's so important that we think about stuff like this. We get out of ourselves. We get out of our own little world. We get out of our me, 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 me. And we think about how great and how big and how vast our Creator is and how we could never, ever, ever comprehend. And then that brings a comfort to me, knowing that this God who controls the order of this universe that I can't even wrap my brain around, He is in control of my life. What do I have to be afraid of? When a God who can control this moon and these stars and this earth, what do I have to be afraid of? Just saying that sentence right there, I just feel so comforted, so incredibly safe and secure, because that is the God I serve. He is in control. So in terms of simplifying, We look at our world and we get so caught up in the details, in the stuff, in the distractions, in all the little itty bitty things that go on every single day. But if we want to simplify our lives, just think about God and how big He is, and automatically, like more than 50% of the things that I'm stressed about just sort of fade away into the background, because I'm like, really? Those are the things I'm stressed out about? What am I going to make for dinner? Did I make my meal plan for this week? Oh, woe is me, I have so much laundry. Are you kidding me? Like, these things, yes, our everyday life is important. Yes, God cares about all the little details. But when we live our life from the perspective of this vast universe and how great and big God is and how we are just like this small little thing in it, it can really help us to get our priorities in control. It can eliminate so much of our worry. Like I said, it makes me feel such a comfort. And this is coming from somebody who has struggled with worry. But it brings me such a comfort to actually see how big God is and how huge. And so, like, when I was reading this book, a lot of these astronauts, their experiences and the way they described, at one point, I don't know all the technical science stuff. At one point, so I do know that when the men were walking on the moon, there's another spacecraft in orbit kind of waiting for them, and he kind of circles in orbit waiting for them, and then somehow they reconnect and go back to Earth together. I don't know how all that scientific stuff works. When I read those parts, my eyes glaze over. I'm like, give me the spiritual stuff. Give me the details. But that stuff blows my mind too. But anyway, so this one astronaut, he's doing this orbit around the moon while he's waiting for the other two that are actually walking on the moon. And so as he is orbiting, he is all alone. Okay, we think like it's scary, like we get lost somewhere in our town or in our state, or this guy is circling the moon by himself. And so I can't even imagine like that feeling of being alone in this vast blackness of outer space. And I'm thinking, if something goes wrong, right? And so he said, as he's orbiting the moon, he has to go on the dark side of the moon every so often. And it's completely black. And he doesn't see the earth from there or anything familiar. And he is literally completely alone. Like, we're talking hundreds of thousands of miles away from any civilization in outer space. Like, blows my mind. So he's over there, and he's on this dark side of the moon, and he realizes the magnitude of literally how alone he is. To me, that almost gives me a claustrophobic panic feeling. But he described it as a beautiful solitude. That it was like there's no alone that we on earth could ever imagine, because there's always people around, right? He's in outer space, literally alone. Whew, that's a crazy feeling. But you must realize that there is some connection between you and your creator to actually feel secure and comfortable in that solitude. So that's pretty cool as well. So anyway, in terms of living simply, how can we keep our mindset, on these types of things? Because like, as I'm reading this book, it actually is bringing me so much less anxiety, because I'm just thinking about how big and how great our God is. And it just gives me like such a peace inside. Like, honestly, I go, shopping, and I'm not feeling the need to buy things. When you go and you're just like, well, it feels good to buy something. Like, I'm like, no. You're focusing on the things that matter most. You're not filling up on stuff. I haven't wanted to go on my internet or my Facebook or my Instagram, because I was really into this book. And that book was then bringing me actually into that mindset and that perspective of how great and how big our God is. And so, I don't know if you guys are following along what I'm trying to say here, but what I'm saying is, I believe it's so important for us to get out of our our own little worlds that we're building, our own little kingdoms that we're building for ourselves, and really focus on how great and how big our God is. I mean, look at David in the Psalms. He did that very thing, right? You can't help but praise the Lord when you look up at the sky and you think about this great creator that we have. The other thing that I thought about this week, and I actually posted on the blog about it today, this is going to sound like a morbid thought, and it really isn't meant to be at all. But again, it helps us in our mindset of keeping it simple and focusing on what matters most and weeding out all the distractions. I was driving the other day down one of the country roads by my house, and it was just like a beautiful morning, a beautiful scene. The fog was rising up, the cows were in the distance, and all of a sudden I just got this thought. It just stopped me, almost to the point where it almost stopped my car. It stopped me dead in my thoughts. I don't even know where it came from. It just popped in my head, and it was like, what if today was the day that I was going to meet Jesus? Right? What a weird thought to just pop in my head. But then I started to just have all these thoughts come, oh my goodness, what if I knew that today was the day that I would meet Jesus face to face? And this isn't in a morbid, I'm not trying to be morbid, it's just true. What if, oh my goodness, am I living the life I would want to if I knew I was going to meet Jesus today? Am I making the decisions I would want to? Am I doing the things I would want to? Am I treating people the way I would treat people? And quite frankly, that can happen at any moment. So we should be living that way. We should be living knowing that I can meet Jesus face to face today. And that helps me in my quest to simplify. When I think about the fact that, my life, often we think tomorrow is promised, or 20 years from now is guaranteed, or, our whole future just seems like this concrete thing. We talk about the future like it's going to happen. We don't really know if the next moment is going to happen. Am I doing right now what I really would want to do? There's no putting off till tomorrow when you have that mindset. There's no wasting time on stuff. There's no wasting time on distractions. There's no wasting time on the things that we let clutter up our lives when we really think about the fact that our next moment isn't promised. And this isn't meant to be like I said, a morbid thought or a downer. This is meant, well, first of all, meeting Jesus is the biggest excitement, right, for all of us. So why do we not live that way? At least I know I don't. I'm not talking for you guys out there. I'm not trying to say this as a whole, but I know for me, I have a lot of work to do. I want to eliminate clutter in my life. I want to eliminate stress and distractions and the things that take away from my focus on God. Then I can really look at the perspective of how great and how big our God is, like I learned reading my moon books. And I can focus on the fact that at any moment could be the moment that I meet Jesus. And did I use the time he gave me well? If I look back, I know I've wasted a ton of time on the wrong things. I know I've wasted a ton of money. I know I've wasted a ton of emotions, maybe being worried for sure, or angry, or holding a grudge, or complaining, or anything that's not bringing him glory. Our purpose in life is to glorify God. This often comes as a shock to us, but our life is not about us. Our life is about our Creator who created us and living our life for him and doing what he created us to do. And ultimately, what we're created to do is bring glory to him. So are the decisions I'm making today bringing glory to him? And the way is the way that I'm treating people today glorifying him? Is what I'm doing with my time glorifying him? Is what I'm doing in my ministry? Is what I'm doing in my family? Is what I'm letting my eyes look at, on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, it is, or the TV? Is what I'm reading? All the decisions that we make, will be changed. We can live so simply because all of a sudden we are focused on the things we're supposed to be focused on, glorifying God in everything we do. So I want to encourage you today, think outside of yourself for a little bit. If you have to go thinking about the moon that did for me, that wasn't my intention. I was just interested in the people that landed on the moon. But boy, did it really start to get me thinking about how big God is. Maybe for you, there's something else in creation that interests you, or science, or whatever it is, that might help you to kind of shift your perspective. But I want to encourage you today, whatever it is, change your perspective and start thinking about yourself in God's eyes. Stop putting ourselves so big and Him so small. He is so big and we are so small, right? So I want to encourage you, look at things in the perspective of how incredibly big God is, how incredibly just vast and magnificent He is. We can't even wrap our brains around the fact that He knows everything in existence. And He knows our future, and He's the one who created us. What a comfort. And how easy to live more simply when you have that perspective of, I'm here to serve this great, enormous God. And then looking at the perspective that at any moment I could be face to face with Jesus. This time here on earth, this little tiny speck of dust in the universe, will be over, but eternity is forever. And am I doing the most purposeful things I can be doing here with this teeny tiny short amount of time, even though we think it will never end, the short amount of time that we have? And most of all, am I glorifying God in everything I do? So that just gives you a little peek into my brain this week and how I've been thinking and the things I've been thinking about. But quite honestly, it's been really helpful. It's been keeping me in my word. It's been keeping my mind set where it needs to be. So I hope that would encourage you. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment on the blog for this, on the Facebook page, on the Instagram. Share and rate this podcast if it has encouraged you or blessed you in any way. Let others know about it. That just would bless me, because then I would be able to get my message out there to more folks. So thank you for listening. Again, the Bible-based homeschooling e-course is on sale through August 8th. It's just $19. You can find it at simplylivingforhim.thinkific.com. You can go over to my Facebook page at Simply Living for Him, my Instagram page at Simply Living for Him, and let me know what you think of this podcast. We can continue the conversation, and let me know if it encouraged you. I hope you have a great week, and until the next time, I wish you blessings and joy.